Hello, my name is Joseph Yu, and I am an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. It's my honor to present my study, Opinion Leaders on Twitter Immigration Issue Networks, combining agenda settings, effects, and the two-step flow of information. So, immigration policy has been one of the most controversial issues in the US. So, various historical events such as 9/11 and inauguration of President Donald J. Trump and legislative actions including Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act of 2007 and DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, have intensified the U.S. immigration controversies uh, within within the past 2 decades. So this kind of historical events generated active debates, protests, and petitions. And in addition, President Trump has accelerated public controversies over the U.S. immigration policy through a series of executive orders. So President Trump is promoting has been promoting controlling immigration as a major issue in his policy agenda, such as Build the Wall, and he also gave some uh, show negative attitude toward the immigration. So within the context of these debates about immigration in the U.S., opinion leaders have played a significant role in shaping public opinion. So traditionally, opinion leaders rely on mainstream news sources such as newspaper, television, and radio. But nowadays, opinion leaders are taking advantage of new media technologies such as Twitter for consuming and disseminating information. So, in the era of big data, big computer data, more diverse forms of information sources and information flows can be identified. So, this diverse circulation of media raises the question: who sets agendas on Twitter, Immigration Issue Network? Is it the news media, opinion leaders, or the public? So this study this study examines opinion leaders on Twitter issue networks in order to cast light on two-step flow of information and agenda setting effects in Twitter issue networks. Specifically, the author identified opinion leaders on Twitter immigration issue network and measured the longitudinal direction of agenda setting effects among news media, opinion leaders, and the public. First, I want to define some terms. Twitter publics can be defined as users who post tweets with relevant hashtags or keywords based on their shared interest. So these networks are organized around issues which are defined as contestable matters of concern regarding facts, values, and policies. So issues are contentious, and issue networks are organized around the issue, which are contentious with individuals and groups taking opposing positions. The difference between issue and topics can be explained by how people can take side. Unlike topics, issues are contentious, and uh, issue networks can be defined as the broadening process of organizational participation in policymaking by issue activists or issue experts who can come together to form networks. So in my study, I choose U.S. immigration as a case study, and I believe U.S. immigration is a great example of issues there are supporters of immigrants, and there are people who are opposing to more immigrants in the U.S. territory. Rogers Berson and Godet conceptualized the two-step flow of information, arguing that the flow of information from mass media to the less active public is mediated by a small number of opinion leaders. So, opinion leaders can be defined as individuals who paid closer attention to news media and who transferred the influence of their personal opinions and attitudes to the rest of their whole networks, to their public, in a desired way. The two-step flow of information can still exist in social curation as a form of information exchange in homogeneous networks shaped by shared interest and common characteristics among members on Twitter. Social curation and the broadcasting role of Twitter can influence the reinterpretation and distribution of information on Twitter, especially for opinion leaders. They can consume information actively, and they can post tweets with their perspective to curate the information from their perspectives, and they can disseminate their opinions about that information on social media. Also, others can disseminate opinion leaders' opinions on Twitter. So, since its first emergence in the late 1960s, agenda setting theory has been regarded as one of the most prominent theories to empirically explain media effects on audiences. So, agenda setting theory assumes that if traditional media covered and highlighted some issues in their news presentation frequently, the volume of news coverage, then those issues were perceived as important in the audience's mind. So it is the audience's perception about the issue, right? That's agenda setting theory. So first level agenda setting effects test the hypothesis of issue transfer, arguing that the mass media set the agenda for each political campaign, influencing the silence of attributes toward the political issues. The second level agenda setting focuses on attribute silence. At this level, the attributes of a public agenda become much more important than they are in the first level agenda settings. So the object in the agenda setting processes has attributes defined as a variety of characteristics and traits that desire object. So attributes can be divided into substantive, for example, characteristics of politicians such as trustworthiness and electabilities, and effective attributes such as positive or negative evaluations to politicians. Brocius and Weyman combined the two-step flow of information and agenda setting and suggested early recognizers. So early recognizers could serve as mediators between news media and the public in the classical and the reversed two-step flow of information models. In addition, early recognizers could be initiators of agenda setting process. They could initiate traditional agenda setting process that news media influenced the public agenda and also reverse the agenda setting effects, which argues that the public's interest and issues pass from the public to the media through early recognizers, so by them. So it is the reversed form of a classical two-step model and classical agenda setting effects. So again, let's go back to our question. Who sets agendas on Twitter? So by adding an analysis of opinion leader cluster to the investigation of agenda setting effects, This study can test whether the traditional two-step flow of information model holds true or whether others, such as opinion leaders or the public, initiate reverse agenda setting effects. So these are my research questions. What is the causal relationship among news media, opinion leaders, and the public in terms of issue silence in U.S. immigration issue networks? The second research question is what is the causal relationship among news media, opinion leaders, and the public in terms of effective attributes in the U.S. immigration issue networks? So in order to do my study, I gleaned tweets with the hashtag immigration. I used the Discover text from October 1st, 2016 to January 31st, 2017. So it was the presidential election campaign period, and there was a presidential election at the second week of November. So I could glean a total of 397,665 tweets, and I then converted it into retweet networks for the analysis. And the total number of retweet networks is 227,962 tweets. So both first and second level agenda setting tests were conducted. So among news media, opinion leaders, and the public. So first, I differentiated, I classified Republican and Democratic groups of opinion leaders and the public, and I relied on their political ideologies listed on their profiles and their tweets they posted, and I used Python to classify Democratic and Republican groups, and these Republican and Democratic group of opinion leaders and the public were used for second level agenda setting effect. So the keywords that I used for to classify Republican and Democratic youth groups are the hashtags like I'm with her and United Blue for Democratic and Liberal users, and TCOT, top conservative users on Twitter, and Make America Great Again for Republican and conservative users. So I conducted Granger causality test, and Granger causality test examines the change in the volume of one trend preceded the change of values of another. So I created 6 networks in the first and second level agenda setting. So the first two, the entire network and the entire between networks uh, were subject for the first level agenda setting, and entire Republican network, Republican retweet network, entire Democratic networks, and Democratic retweet networks were subject for the second level agenda setting. So I operationally defined national news coverage as news gathered through LexisNexis search on New York Times, Washington Post, ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and NBC. So I could glean a total of 4,981 news coverage. So opinion leaders were operationally defined as Twitter users who were officially verified. You may see the blue badge, which are officially verified, and Twitter users who scored within the top 10% of in-degree centrality scores in the entire network. So in order to do that, I had to conduct social network analysis. So tweets posted by those users are tweets can be defined as opinion leader cluster. and the rest of tweets rest of Twitter accounts are defined as the public. So I have to determine the appropriate number of legs for each groups uh, to come, and these are confirmed by a criterion outlined for a leg selection, such as AIC, Akeake Information Criterion. Based on the result of uh, lag selection, time lags for entire immigration network and retweet networks were 5. So see these bolded types. And the time lags for the entire Republican networks were 5 days also, and Republican retweet networks were 2 days. The entire time lags for uh, Democratic networks were 3 days, and time lags for uh, Democratic between networks for 5 days, which means that it takes a few days to observe agenda setting effects. So the next three tables are result of Granger causality test. So uh, I added a red box for the significant relationships. So a total of 12 significant cases were found out of 36. Specifically, 5 significant top-down agenda setting effects and 7 bottom-up agenda setting effects were found. So I could have found that news media could set just one agendas, and opinion leaders, the combination of top-down and bottom-up agenda setting effects uh, were, were 5 cases. Opinion leaders who combined top-down and agenda setting effects were 5 cases, and the public could set the agenda of 6. So I could observe the activeness of Twitter opinion leaders who were conservative and supported stricter immigration policies in the second level agenda setting effect. So also I could find out mutual agenda setting effects between opinion leaders and the public. So they could mutually set the agenda for each other. So again, I would like to review this table. So here, 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 and opinion leaders to the news media. This is the bottom half agenda setting effects, and these are the and these are the opinion agenda setting effects initiated by the public. Also, there is a retweet network, and this one, and this one is for Republican Immigration Issue Network. 4 cases can be found in Republican Immigration Issue Networks, and 2 cases could be found at Democratic Issue Network. This is the review of the table. So if you want to see these tables more, and you may stop, you may pause and see the table. So I can say that there is no fixed direction of agenda setting effects on Twitter issue networks. So in terms of journalists, they have to monitor tweeting activities and use tweets as a news source by citing users' tweets and utilizing their opinions in the news. So this is a great example of a reverse agenda setting. So if I equate the Twitter activities as the public, journalists can rely on what's going on Twitter, or can observe what's going on Twitter, and they may rely on Twitter activities for their news gathering source and the news gathering source. And Republican opinion leaders were active in setting the public agenda. It was 2 out of 2 cases, all which can be supported by trolls in Reddit and Russian intervention during the 2016 presidential election period. So Methodologically, all studies are connected to examine Twitter opinion leaders. I can say that it is the holistic approach. And theoretically, all studies confirm the pre-existing definitions of agenda opinion leaders and yields new insights regarding agenda setting effects. So I'm sure that this study could broaden the range of agenda setting studies by focusing on one issue, US immigration policy. And also, I believe that my study is one of the very first studies to combine two-step flow of information and agenda setting effects on Twitter. However, there are some limitations in my study, so I could only focus on US immigration policy and on Twitter, so I could not consider the democratic variables. So, some issues like Black Lives Matter and same sex marriage can be heavily affected by personal information, but in my study, I could not concern. But so that will be the I could find a way how to consider democratic information to for the opinion leadership study. Also, I could not gather the traditional MIP, the most important problem questions for my study. So because I had to rely on tweets only, so I could not get the answer for MIP. But next time, it might be a good idea to merge Twitter data and MIP questions. But however, I believe these studies advance the understanding of opinion leadership and the Twitter issue network. As flows of information are becoming more diversified, the answer to question who sets the agenda on Twitter can be everyone.